My husband and I did a 10-day northern Italy adventure, and we spent our first 3 days of the trip in the Cinque Terre. We flew into Milan and took the train down to the Cinque Terre, which is about 4 hours. The train will take you directly into Monterosso al Mar, which is where you'll hop on a second train to get down to whatever town you are staying in. We chose to stay in the beautiful town of Manarola. From the train station, you have to go down and then back up a set of stairs, and then through a tunnel to be able to enter the town. Once you exit the tunnel, the town completely opens up and is so stunning. We rented an Airbnb up on the hillside. Beware if you're looking to stay in Manarola, most of the town is super hilly. Luckily, we are pretty young and in shape, and the climb was totally worth it. We rented an adorable studio Airbnb overlooking the Ligurian Sea. From our room, we could actually see people jumping off the cliffs in the harbor below. So naturally, the first thing we did was throw on our bathing suits and head down to join some of the action. These rocks are no joke. They look like they're not super high, but once you get up on them, trust me, you're not going to want to jump off. Many of the locals were jumping off the highest rock and even doing backflips, which we did not attempt. It's a bit of a walk to get down to where you can actually go into the water. There are several staircases and a steep hill that you do have to go down, so keep that in mind if you have any mobility issues. We traveled there in June, and the water was absolutely freezing. Once you jump in, you realize how deep the water actually is. And many of the rocks in the water are very slippery, so be careful. A lot of people were actually wearing water shoes. You're definitely going to want to spend a decent amount of time here, so definitely put a couple hours for this on your itinerary. After swimming, we headed back up to our Airbnb to get ready for dinner. I didn't record our dinner, but we ate at Trattoria dei Billy. I definitely think it was a must-stop if you're visiting Manarola. Our Airbnb was already up on the cliffside, so we just had a short walk to the restaurant, but beware, it is a very steep climb up to the restaurant if you're not already staying up there. After dinner, we grabbed ourselves a bottle of wine from the Cinque Terre and enjoyed it overlooking our beautiful view. The next morning, we woke up and prepared for our beach day. We caught the first train we could over to Monterosso al Mar. Monterosso is an adorable town in the Cinque Terre and is probably the most flat of all of them. It's also the only one with a true beach. We started out by just walking around and exploring the town and finding a little spot to stop for breakfast. Once we finished breakfast, we went down to the beach. Note, there are definitely some umbrellas and lounge chairs set up, but you do have to pay for those. Instead, we opted to just lay on the rocks. We brought our own towels, and it was perfect. Now, if you're used to sand beaches, beware the rocks are a little bit painful under your feet, but it's totally worth it for the views. And I highly recommend you get one of these rum buckets from Stella's Marina Beach Bar. After our beach day, we headed back to Manarola to freshen up for dinner. From our Airbnb, we realized we could see Corniglia and Monterosso al Mar, which was really cool to see after being there for the morning. And as for Corniglia, we'll be hiking there tomorrow morning. After freshening up, we headed onto the train to get to Vernazza. Vernazza is the village that inspired Disney Pixar's Luca, and I highly recommend you watch it before coming. The harbor in Vernazza is incredibly picturesque, and we couldn't help but just walk around in awe. It was so fun to watch the fishermen in their boats and the trains driving by. We grabbed ourselves a little espresso before dinner and just sat on the rocks and took it all in. One of the highlights for me was actually seeing a little kid playing soccer in the square. It was straight out of the movie Luca. Vernazza was incredibly walkable. There were so many nooks and crannies to explore. We had a lot of time to kill before dinner, so after relaxing on the rocks and sunbathing for a bit, we decided to explore more of the village. We're huge cat people on this channel, and we actually left 2 kitties at home, so it felt like a little slice of home seeing this little kitty in the souvenir stand. For dinner, we went to Ristorante Belfort. It's called that because the restaurant is actually in an old fort perched on the side of the rocks. We enjoyed some squid ink pasta and some locally cut fish. And for dessert, we went with a recommendation from our waiter. And we rounded out the night by listening to some live music. The next morning, we grabbed some lattes and some pistachio croissants and headed out on our hike. One of the amazing things about the Cinque Terre is that you can hike between any of the towns. Some of the hikes you have to pay for in advance, so definitely check that out before hiking. We chose this hike because at the time it was free and it was a very convenient way for us to go see Corniglia. This hike was absolutely beautiful. We passed several private residences on the way, and we even got to meet this adorable Italian dog. The beginning of this hike is truly challenging if you're coming from Manarola to Corniglia. There were some pretty steep staircases that needed to be climbed. Luckily, on the way up, you're weaving through vineyards, olive groves, and even farms. We had to take a short pit stop in one of the hilltop villages called Velastra. It's not considered part of the Cinque Terre, which kind of added to its charm because it wasn't touristy at all, and the only people that were there were locals. After grabbing a beer and a quick Powerade to fuel up, we were back on our way to Corniglia. This hike took us about 2 hours in total, and after stopping in Velastra, most of it was downhill. If you're planning to visit the Cinque Terre, I highly recommend you go on one of the hikes. It's truly the best way to see the towns from above. Once we arrived in Corniglia, we were ravenous. We quickly did a lap around the entire town, and then swiftly found ourselves a place to stop and eat. Corniglia is the only town that doesn't have direct water access, but you are able to walk to the end of the town to see the water over the cliffs. After our hike, we headed back to Manarola for my favorite activity of our entire trip. Our activity/lunch for the afternoon was Nessun Dorma. We read absolutely incredible reviews online about their pesto making class, so we had to try it out for ourselves, and I'm so glad we did. While you're learning to make the pesto, the owner himself is actually there and tells you the story of how Nessun Dorma was formed. The Cinque Terre is known to be the place where pesto actually originated. And as it turns out, there's a very delicate process that goes into making it. Nessun Dorma is definitely an experience where you can plan to make some friends. We sat at a community table between a mother-daughter duo and a mother-son duo. We thought this class had an incredible value. I think we only paid $80 per person, but with that we actually got the aprons you see everyone wearing. We learned how to make pesto from scratch, and they gave us the recipe to bring home. On top of that, they gave us a free bottle of wine to enjoy while we were making the pesto, and a bottle of wine to take home. And that's not all. The staff was incredibly friendly and helpful throughout this entire process and made it so much more enjoyable. You'll see this in a little bit, but we were also given basically a full lunch. They gave us a huge board filled with prosciutto, focaccia, melon, even some burrata. It was more than enough to fill the two of us up. We even topped off the class with a short little dance party break. It was everything we needed to keep the mood going.
Every day we open from 4:30 till 9. From May till November, I do this.
After attempting to finish the enormous plate of food they gave us, we wanted to keep the party going with some of the friends we made at the event. The son that we were sitting next to at our table wanted to go cliff jumping, so we went to support him. Next, we headed to our final village, Riomaggiore. We were so incredibly impressed with this town. While we 100% recommend staying in Manarola, this would definitely be our second option. We didn't really have any plan while coming to Riomaggiore. All we knew is that we wanted to try to sit on the rocks and watch the sunset. Being the southernmost town of the Cinque Terre, we found Riomaggiore to be way less busy and just a nice way to end our trip. There were several other people who had the same idea as us who grabbed a Coke and a pizza and sat on the rocks and watched the sunset. After this, we headed to bed because we had to wake up very early to catch our train to Lake Como for our second leg of our journey. We spent 3 incredible days in Lake Como, and here's what we did. We took the ferry straight to Bellagio, which is where our Airbnb was. It was right off the Salita Cerboloni famous cobblestone staircase. I'm not gonna lie, the climb to this Airbnb was difficult. Luckily, my husband carried our bags up the staircase. But don't worry, you guys, the climb was totally worth it because our Airbnb was incredible. For an Airbnb for just 2 people, we had 3 separate patios to enjoy. And being right in the heart of Bellagio, there was a lot to see off these patios. I mean, seriously, take a look at this view. We practically spent every evening out on this patio after each dinner. Speaking of dinner, we went to Baba Yaga our first night. Baba Yaga is a cozy little pizza spot where we were actually able to score a table on the patio with no reservation. Bonus points because it was some of the best pizza we had on our entire trip. The next morning kicked off my favorite day of the entire trip. This was the day we got to drive our own rental boat around the entirety of Lake Como. But of course, like any boat day, we had to start the day off by fueling up with a hearty breakfast. We grabbed a couple of lattes and some pastries before heading out to La Punta Spartivento. We just had a little bit of time to kill before the boat day, so we went to this beautiful lookout point where you can see all 3 branches of Lake Como meet. We got there at 9:30 and had the entire place to ourselves. We rented our boat from Boat Hire Bellagio, which is about a 30-minute walk from the heart of Bellagio, which we didn't mind at all because the walk was stunning and Mirko, who runs Boat Hire Bellagio, was top of the line. Mirko actually provided us with a map of the lake and suggested where we go after taking a look at the weather forecast for the day. He told us to start out in the Lecco branch, which is the southeastern stretch of the lake. This part of the lake didn't even look like Lake Como to me. It was incredibly peaceful and secluded. There were way fewer towns on this side of the lake, so the nature was truly untouched. Honestly, we were the only boat over on this side of the lake, so we felt free to kind of pop our champagne and dance around. It was almost like we had the entire lake to ourselves. After enjoying a couple glasses of champagne and really taking in the natural beauty of the Lecco branch, we decided it was time to head up towards the Colico branch. The town of Varenna sits at the very top of the Lecco branch and the very bottom of the Colico branch. This village is truly something out of a storybook. We planned to spend the next morning in the village itself, but seeing it from the water was one of the most incredible experiences of my life. Next we headed to the Colico branch, and this is a very rugged and windswept part of the lake. The further north you get on the lake, the closer to the Italian Alps you are getting. So as a passenger, this was probably my least favorite part of the trip, but Tanner driving was having the best time hitting the waves. Next we headed towards the most iconic part of the lake, the Como branch. The Como branch is iconic for so many reasons. Via Balbianello is on the Como branch, and you might recognize it from its appearances in the Star Wars and the James Bond franchises. We spent quite a bit of time just admiring the villa itself before we moved on, and checked out George Clooney's favorite lakeside mansion as well. And to round out our boat day before returning back to Bellagio, Tanner had to jump off the famous Nesso Bridge. After our incredible boat day, we woke up early the next day, determined to complete the Golden Triangle. The Golden Triangle consists of Bellagio, Varenna, and Menaggio. We ferried straight to Varenna in the morning for breakfast at Bar Il Molo. After breakfast, we decided to walk the streets of Varenna. There were so many amazing surprises in Varenna. There were so many places to stop and get your feet wet. After a couple of hours of walking around Varenna, we decided to make our way back to the ferry. The ferry from Varenna to Menaggio was very quick. I probably did the least amount of research on Menaggio, so I didn't really know what to expect. I was surprised to find out that this was probably the best town for shopping, and we thoroughly enjoyed walking around the lakeside promenade with a beer in hand. Thanks so That evening, we turned in early after stopping for a burger and a beer because we needed to rest up for our drive to the Dolomites, our third leg of the trip. We spent our last few days road tripping to the Dolomites, or as the locals call them, the Dolomites. We were able to rent a car straight from the Milan Central Station. Depending on what route you take, it's about 4 to 5 hours to get up to the Dolomites. We were staying in Cortina d'Ampezzo, the B&B hotel. The drive wasn't too bad. I would say the worst part was trying to figure out the tolls. If you're renting a car, the rental agency will explain to you how to use them, but sometimes it's not super self-explanatory and each one of them kind of does things a different way. After a long drive, we stopped and got some food in Cortina and then headed on to our B&B hotel. The next morning, we set off on my most anticipated hike of the trip, Lago di Serapis. This hike can take between 4 to 5 hours, so we set off pretty early at around 8 a.m., which was awesome for us because the trailhead was literally right next to our hotel. We went in mid-June, which is the very beginning of the season up there, so some of the trails can be dangerous and covered with snow. This hike is actually a loop, but we decided to do it out and back, taking the easier route to avoid any major snow. When you finally reach the lake, I mean, wow. I've never seen water like this before in my life. As you can see, the water looks super milky and turquoise, which is actually due to all the glacial minerals inside. I would leave about 30 minutes to an hour once you reach the end of this hike just to stop and admire its beauty. You'll definitely want to walk the perimeter of the lake to be able to take in all of the different viewpoints. Since we left early, we were some of the first people to reach the lake, but it definitely filled up quickly towards the end of our stay at the lake. There was actually a couple hiking with what appeared to be wolves. Maybe they're a dog. I don't know. Maybe you guys can let me know, but I swear to God they were wolves. Towards the end of our time admiring this view, some of the clouds started to roll in, which is super common for the Dolomites, so make sure you check the radar before booking any of these hikes. After about an hour, we turned back and started making our descent. Overall, this hike was pretty moderate, but there definitely were a few hold your breath moments. After finishing our hike, we headed over to Pizzeria Edelweiss. This was definitely a well-earned meal after that hike. We were super impressed with the size of the menu. There were a million different pizza options on it. We were also impressed with the size of the pours that they give. After finishing up lunch, we headed to our next stop, Lago de Brais. I think it took us around 45 minutes to get there. Because Lago de Brais is super accessible, it was way more touristy than Lago di Serapis was. You can actually pull your car right into the parking lot and just walk up, which I have to admit I was super grateful for after the long hike we just did. There's a pretty moderate hike that takes you around the perimeter of the lake, which is what we did. And we were super surprised to hear a choir singing in the distance. At one point, we actually saw a mother duck and her ducklings. They were just grazing and bathing in the lake, and it was so adorable we had to stop and get some footage of them. These are the type of moments that make you stop and think, wow, this is what life's all about. After admiring the ducks for a while, we completed our loop and made our way back to where we parked our car. When we made it back to the visitor center area, we were surprised to be greeted by the carolers. Being in the Alps, I really felt like I was in the Sound of Music at this point. After 2 long hikes and seeing 2 beautiful lakes, we headed back to Cortina. The next day was a full day of refugio hopping. First on our list was the Cinque Torre hut. We actually stopped here and got a latte and enjoyed the view of the Cinque Torre. Next, we continued our hike past the Cinque Torre, and as you can see, it was a super cloudy day. And the higher we climbed, the cloudier it got. Our next stop was Refugio Avaro. It got pretty cold, so we started adding layers at this point. We actually passed Refugio Averau and went on to Refugio Nuvalu, but came back down and did enjoy lunch at Refugio Averau. Refugio Nuvalu was actually our entire reason for doing this hike, and unfortunately the view from the top was less than exciting. Hopefully we'll be able to return when it's less cloudy, but I think the moody, cloudy experience was super fun as well. After we descended back down past the Cinque Terre again, it was time to head back into town for dinner. And I'm not even gonna lie to you guys, I never repeat restaurants, but Pizzeria Edelweiss was so good, we just had to go back a second time. Plus, it was the closest restaurant to our hotel, and honestly, I was getting a little nauseous on the twisty-turny roads. On our fourth day, we had to drive back to Milan, but not without a pit stop in Lake Garda. Finding parking in Sirmione was a nightmare, but we did have the best meal of our trip at Ristorante Ilaria. Tanner got this pumpkin risotto that was topped with bacon. I know it doesn't sound like the best thing on the planet, but he is still talking about it to this day. Sirmione was beautiful, but it was very, very, very overcrowded with tourists. I'm super glad we stopped because it was incredibly beautiful, but if I were to return to Lake Garda, I would probably try out a different town that was a little bit less crowded. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're planning a trip to the Cinque Terre, Lake Como, the Dolomites, or even Lake Garda, please check out our 10 days in Northern Italy blog post linked below. We hope you found this video helpful. Please don't forget to like and subscribe as we have more content coming to you guys shortly.